Hello, and welcome to my last spell perks tier list. A few things to do before we get going with it. First, tier lists are bad. I don't know how else to put this, but I think it's a fun exercise, but there's no right answer. You have to play the game that you are given, and you need to think critically about every decision that you're making. One perk is not always going to be better than another. That being said, I think it is very valuable to sit down and look at every perk in detail and question the things that we know and about those perks and how we've been using them. It is very easy to get stuck in a meta that you are working within and forget that skills outside of it exist. So this is an opportunity more for me than anyone else to re-examine the perks and ask the question, am I underestimating certain ones? Am I overestimating certain ones? What does the perk ecosystem look like? You may be asking, if this is the first video of mine that you've seen, why is this person doing a perk tier list? Who the heck are they? So my credentials are, I play a lot of strategy games. I like to think deeply about them. I'm currently playing the last spell on APOC 5-ish with pretty consistently good results. I have not beaten Glenwald on APOC 5, but I have beaten Lakeburg on APOC 5 and am continuing to press forward. But I'm playing the game at a very high level and I think do reasonably well consistently. The last note before we actually get into the tier list is I've chosen the order very specifically. It's going to be a little painful, so I warn you, but we're going to be going through the perks by tier, and we'll kind of take a break after each tier to talk about where we are, because the decision-making process that you're doing is when you unlock the first tier of perks, you only have access to them. Then when you unlock the second tier of perks, you have access to those two levels, so the rankings will be useful. And then finally, since we hadn't talked about it, the tiers that I'm using is S tier is like, I almost always take this. It's very rare that I don't. Excellent are exceptionally good. Solid, yeah, this is a good perk. I would use it, not necessarily above any of the other ones. Fine, meh, and bad are relatively straightforward, but then I did add a final section here called specific builds. And I think that's because some perks within particular builds or particular archetypes can be valuable, good, strong. So I don't want to just call something bad because of something like that. So you may see some synergies popping up in there. The other thing that I will try to do is in the lower left corner, as we go to a skill, I'll bring it up so that we can look at it. So the first skill that we're going to be looking at is cherry picking. Cherry picking is when attacking an isolated unit, the attack gets 40% reliability. I generally think that I underrate reliability, but I know that it is good. So I'm going to put this at the solid tier. It's unlikely that I'm always going to pick it first and foremost, but it is valuable to have it there. Debuff, plus 15% stun chance. Now, this is one that could just go into specific builds because, you know, if you're doing a hammer build, I think stun skill is very strong. Or if you're going with a power staff for stunning entrance, like there are a lot of times, maybe even like a poison build with Septic Shock. But I think that generally speaking, stunning as a standalone perk probably also exists within the solid tier. I think it's about on par with reliability, perhaps a little more situational. You're always going to be doing damage. You're not always going to be stunning. So I'm going to drop it down to fine. Back protection. Whenever a hero is adjacent to a building, defense, or an obstacle, they gain 25 armor. This bonus increases by 5 for each level after. So in the end game, this starts to fall off, but I think early on, this is really good, and it's a, for lack of a better descriptor, like a must take from my perspective for melee heroes who are going to be taking incidental damage. It's one of the best ways to increase your armor. So I think that puts it at the solid tier for me. Now we move on to Harvester. Every 3 enemies killed +1 mana regen. This modifier is reset every morning. If you've watched me play any amount of the last spell, you will know that Harvester is my S rank ability. From my perspective, the advantage of skills like Harvester is that they provide a crazy amount of sustain. So sustain is the idea that a character can do a lot of things, do a lot of mana casting abilities, and not come into the next day with me needing to spend workers on mana pools to recharge their mana. So anytime I see this on a character, I almost always take it. Everybody is spending mana, so in a way, I think it is misplaced in the magic tier, in the magic column in general. Now, mana growth, on the other hand, is +4 mana increased by 2 for each level of the hero. I am torn about this one. There is a world in which I just call this bad, but I think I'm actually going to put it down in specific builds. And that is because I think there are certain mana scaling and missing mana synergies that combined are useful, which make it not necessarily just bad. But in and of itself, max mana is not useful because I will always prioritize sustain, aka Harvester, over increasing my total mana pool, because at some point you zero out on mana and you're just having a bad time. Moving on to Sprint. Unlock the Sprint skill, allowing to restore move points in exchange for health. It is 10 health, and you gain 3 move points. I generally believe that Sprint is a strong ability, but and also quite good. See, this is where I'm going to get into trouble. Like, I think it is quite good. 10 health. It just requires a bit of building around. So if you're going to be doing Sprint with any frequency, you need to have an answer to how do I get back health. And at tier 1 in particular, you don't have a lot of options for how to regain health, except for maybe a health potion or investing in health regen. And if you're investing in daily health regen early on, I think you're going to fall behind on your damage dealing capabilities. So I think that it's fine. It's fine verging on meh from my perspective. Fatality. Unlock the Fatality skill, allowing you to execute an enemy with less than 10 health. This threshold is increased by 3 for each level of the hero. Fatality is a no-cost melee range 1 target ability, and it does now proc vampirism. I think that I sleep on Fatality. I think I should be giving my melees Fatality more frequently because it is free, and free things are good. So I'm going to put this higher than I think I would have otherwise. This is one of those skills that once I look at it, I go, you know, it's not as bad as I think it is. And as I look at this, of these 3, reliability is starting to edge into that excellent tier, but we'll see. Now we're moving on to the miscellaneous category. This is kind of like the grab bag, as it were. And the first one that we're looking at here is Cheer. And Cheer unlocks the Cheer skill, which allows you to buff the damage of an ally. It is no cost, range 1 to 10. You have to remember to do it. A weakness of mine, I will not pretend. I forget to cheer a lot. It's hard to track which of your characters has cheer, and then remember to make sure that they are cheering someone. It also requires the character to be duoing in a lane to be close enough to be able to give it, which, as you know, generally you end up with a 2 on each side, 1 on top, 1 on bottom, or rotated 90 degrees configuration. And so if you have cheer on one of your people capable of soloing a lane, you're in for a rough time. So cheer, I think it's fine. And I may do a bit of separating. Once we get all of the tier 1s down, I'm probably going to make sure we're using the entire tier chart here. Coagulation. Armor is increased by 100%, 10% of the hero's daily health regen. I think this is good. I rank it lower than back protection in the early game and higher than back protection in the late game. So given that we're currently doing we're thinking tier 1 at the moment, I guess, yeah, it's quite bad in the early game. So I'm going to put it in the fine tier. I'm going to drop sprint down to the meh tier. That may be controversial. But I think it is not as good as back protection. Because if we go back to back protection for a second here, you're gaining 25 flat off of this. And coagulation in the early game, your character's not going to be, they'll probably be getting about the same amount of HP from it. So maybe I take that one back. Maybe back protection isn't as good and coagulation is slightly better. It's going to depend on your daily health regen, but I'm going to leave them like this, and I am going to bump reliability up to excellent because I think hitting more consistently is very strong. Now we move on to Leapfrog. Upgrades the jump over skill, -1 movement point cost. So it goes from 3 to 2 movement point cost, and it allows you to move 2 range. Now, with the most recent patch, you can now also jump over crevasses and water features. I still don't think this is great. Unfortunately, even with those changes, I think Leapfrog lives firmly in the meh category of I'm probably not going to use that. Potion Throw. +1 bag equipment slot, max of 4. Potions now have a range of 10 tiles. Potions are surprisingly good, but they require an investment that you generally don't have the capacity to make. Like if I'm doing a fun run on APOC 0 or something like that, yeah, I'll throw a potion thrower in, it'll be fun. But I think spending a ton of money on a potion thrower, who, as a reminder, has to be in a duo lane to gain benefit from the potion throwing, or you have to have like insane mobility or lots of teleporters set up. It's just meh. I don't think it's great. It could go specific builds, but I'm actually going to put it in the bad category. I don't think people should be picking up potion throw, especially looking towards the late game. For the most part, if you really have to use a potion on an ally, you can still do that. You just have to move them into a particular location. Quick Reload. Unlocks the Quick Reload skill, allowing you to restore 1 use of all skills on the current weapon. It is target self. It's 3 uses per night, maximum of 1 use per turn. I like this ability. I really do. I think Quick Reload with the right weapons is insanely strong. So, you know, I'm tempted to go very high with it. I think in later tiers it gets significantly better, and we'll shuffle some of these around as we get into later tiers. But I think even in the early tiers, this is a great one to take on night 1, because a lot of weapons you have leftover action points, and being able to get that quick reload is very, very nice. Septic Shock. When applying poison to a unit currently poisoned, also stun them. 50% base chance, modifiable by stun chance. So this is another reasonable one. It means that your bees in particular, which is the most likely one to re-poison someone or re-poison a lot of people, is going to be firing off. I think it's a fine skill with some potential build-arounds to make it stronger. But I don't think it's exceptional or over the top. Good old Perseverance. If you are missing a lot, this ability is for you. And this is where things get tricky, because now I have to find it on the list. There is Perseverance. So basically, every 2 attacks from the hero that are dodged, you gain back 1 action point. So you're spending a minimum of 2 action points to sometimes get back 1 of the 2 action points with a 5% accuracy buff. And you are no longer able to use something like Blaze Propagating, where it can be dodged by 1 of 10 or something like that. So it's not terrible. It's definitely, for me, it's not something that I would take very frequently. I'm going to put it in meh, even though I think, you know, it has a little bit of upside, but especially since the changes, I think it's lost a lot of that. Last but not least is Steady Aim. That is last but not least in tier 1. As long as the hero didn't move during this turn, 10% accuracy and 1 skill range. I really like Steady Aim. I think that it is great to have that little bit of extra movement or extra sphere of influence. So highly a fan, a big fan of this, to the point where I think I'm going to put it in the excellent tier. I don't think it's quite a Harvester level. Like, I will take Harvester on almost anyone, almost anytime. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot. This is our tier 1, and all of these will be linked down in the description in an imager gallery. So you are welcome to go and check out what I thought about for each tier. But that's tier 1 saved. So now we move into tier 2. And the first one is First Blood. All right, so First Blood, I am a big fan. When attacking a unit at full health, attack gains 15% crit. Chef's Kiss, absolutely love it. I think it is an S tier perk for sure. Next up is, I don't think there's much to say about that either. I'll go back for a second. That was a little too quick, but normally if you are critting something, you are killing it. So very, very often you're going to have a longbow, you're going to have blaze, you're going to be hitting a lot of things that haven't previously been hit, and you're hoping to one-shot them. This is not nearly as effective on the bigger enemies that take multiple hits, but you are largely killing a lot of things that if you're doing it right, you're one-shotting them, and First Blood is all about that one-shotting. Contamination. When applying a debuff to a unit, also apply Contagion Alteration for 1 turn. I think there is more play within Contamination than I have previously given credit to. So what I mean by that is I do a lot of Contamination with AoE things, like Contamination with bees, right? So everybody gets contaminated. The issue with Contagion, excuse me, they get Contagion. The issue with Contagion, though, is that it can't propagate to things that already have Contagion. So if you do a big AoE, you've essentially created a block of things that are immune to Contagion, which kind of defeats the purpose, and it's why I'm pretty lukewarm on Contagion. I think you can potentially do Contagion with, say, like a two-handed hammer build, where you propagate stun along with Contagion by stunning a group and then hitting one of those members in the group that's next to some more. So I don't think it's bad. I think it's solid, but not, doesn't knock my socks off. Defensive training. Enemies killed by defenses now give bonus XP to the hero as if they were the killer. Now, stacking multiple defensive trainings can mean that you have more aggregate experience available on the team, but I don't think it's generally worth it. I don't think you're leveling up so much faster. And I think that although catapults are very beneficial, they're usually beneficial for softening things up, and then you finish them off with people. That being said, I don't hate it. I think it's an okay perk, so I'm going to put it in the fine tier. Now we head to Critical Runes. Every 10% of missing mana, 4% critical. I'm going to put it in specific builds. I think if you're going for a... no, actually I'm not. I think I'm actually just going to put it in the bad tier. Gaining basically up to 40% crit when you are out of mana. I don't think it works with blood magic. I need to test that. It would be very different if it worked with blood magic and it guaranteed 40% crit, but I'm relatively sure that that doesn't work that way because you have to have a mana pool for this to proc. And then the problem is mana costing abilities are really good. And so I don't really want to be in a situation where I have no mana, can't use those abilities, but have a ton of crit. So I think it's okay, but I'm not a fan of Critical Runes. Magic Fuel. Damage is increased by 30% of the hero's current mana. I think this one I sleep on a little bit, but I'm going to say that there is just this mana pool build that normally this isn't that valuable. So like, let's say you have, like my high-end characters have 50 mana. So if you have 50 mana, you're getting like I'm bad at math. So let's say if you had 100 mana, you would get 30% damage. So if you have 50 mana, you'd be getting 15% damage, which is like the amount you get from one good level up. And that's end game. So I don't think it's worth picking up Magic Fuel, generally speaking. Bodybuilder, every 25 current max health after 115, 2% damage. So there are clearly people out here. This just got a buff. So there are clearly people out there that are using Bodybuilder very effectively and getting huge health pools and huge amounts of damage out of it. Those people are not me. I generally, like, this is a bit more of like a philosophical tangent, but I focus very heavily on doing damage, right? Things that don't reach my walls, don't hurt my walls if I have them, and don't cause panic. So I'm always trying to alpha strike everything and destroy everything. And so spending a lot to increase health is not really doing that. And as a side note, like if you're getting, say, 50 health from, I think, like a blue health upgrade on a level up, 50 health is giving you 4% damage, which is not... I don't think it's enough. I think this needed a buff, but I'm surprised that... I guess it got a nerf, and that means that people thought that it was strong. I think it's a fine ability. I think situationally it's somewhat strong. Spiky Counter. So this went from health scaling to block scaling. I've never done any huge block builds. I rarely get my block insanely high. So I find this to be kind of a meh thing. I think it could be like you specifically build around block and maybe you become invincible. But the thing that you have to remember that is so difficult is you can't create a invincible unit. You're going to get Lancers that have armor piercing, and they're going to do a ton of damage to you. And so Spiky Counter, like, I mean, is there a world where you're doing, like, so let's see, if you had 40 block, you'd do 100 damage from your riposte, and that wouldn't kill anything. So I don't know. I don't think it's enough. There may be a world in which, like, a poisonous Spiky Counter build is particularly powerful, but I don't know. Avid Learner. I just think that Avid Learner is the defensive one, but better. Like, I think an extra level can make a huge difference. So I'm going to put this at the exceptional tier because I just think that it's doing a lot of work for you. Flexibility. What to say about flexibility other than it looks a lot like the icon for the other one, and you have to be doing something very specific to make flexibility work. Now, as a reminder, anything in specific build is like bad tier, but maybe you could make it better by doing some very specific things. But flexibility, when attacking with a damage type that differs from the previous one, the attack gets 15% damage. So you're doing some type of like sword hand crossbow build or hammer the druid staff build. I don't know what those builds are necessarily, and they don't rock my socks. Glass cannon. I like it. I like this one a lot. 15% crit is a lot of crit, and I don't like my damage dealers taking a bunch of damage. So it is rare that I'm like, oh, the 60 health is a problem. I do occasionally lose people, but I think it's S tier. You can see a trend, right? Sustain and crit, I value very, very highly. Nimbleness. As long as the hero isn't wounded, gain 15% dodge and 2 movement points. Blows my mind that this one got a buff in the most recent patch, because I would have probably put it in the excellent tier as is. So go figure. I think this is very, very strong. I love movement because it allows me to reallocate when I need to shift people around or run away from things that are going to kill me. And 15% dodge is just gravy, and my people don't get wounded or something is going terribly wrong. Overload. +1 bag equipment slot, +1 use per night of every consumable item. It's not as bad as Potion Thrower, because consumable items can be surprisingly strong. But it is also one of those things that I am not going to build around. I'm going to put it in the fine category, I think. And also, as I look at this, very few of my previous decisions are changing, so I don't think I'm going to be switching things around. Poisonous. At the end of a hero's turn, apply poison to all enemies within range of 3 for 30 poison that can scale off of your poison scaling. Oh, how I want this to work, but it is firmly in the Spiky Counter category for me of I don't think tanks with this type of stuff work particularly well. I can't leave my people in the fray. If I do, the piercing from lancers, the explosion of boomers that were just off screen, ravagers that have, you know, killed 3 things and are hitting for like a truck, all of those things are very, very problematic, and I don't have good answers for them, so I can't just leave people out there to soak. Maybe I need to try building a fully defensive character just to see if I can create someone capable of soaking, but so far, that investment has not seemed worth it. Mark. This is another no-cost skill, just like Cheer, and what it does is it removes dodge from the target. So 1 to 9 range not modifiable. That's also true of Cheer, and that's something I learned the hard way. Targets 1, 2 uses per turn, gives that target minus 20 dodge debuff for 1 turn. So it doesn't actually remove all dodge. It only is a minus 20% to dodge. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I'm pretty meh on it, though. Even though it's a free skill, I think it's slightly worse than Cheer, because 15% damage for the whole turn is much better than this. Because, among other things, most of the really high dodge units have really high dodge. So minus 20 is not knocking anyone's socks off. Third Eye. Third Eye is every 2 enemy hits, the next skill gets vision. This modifier doesn't stack. I like Third Eye a lot. I think it's very strong. I think vision, generally speaking, is extremely potent. And so if you have someone that's rocking a longbow or something like that, being able to be like, all right, hit 2 things that you can see, and then you can take out that runner that is sandwiched between 2 buildings that you would have to like run someone all the way over there and waste a whole turn. I think it's excellent. I don't think it's S tier, but you know, if I think what would make it S tier is if it was like tier 5 and it was just like all of your abilities always have vision. I think that would be insanely great for the ranged skill tree and would be awesome. 1 by 1. Whenever a isolated unit is killed, +4 damage or +6 for using physical damage, up to 60% when hitting a non-isolated unit, it resets the bonus. So basically what this means is you can kind of chain kills and get a damage bonus set up. In my early runs, I had really good luck with 1 by 1, and I could get it all the way up there. And it didn't used to have the cap of 60%. I think this is okay. I don't think it's that strong because it is very hard to consistently only hit non-isolated units. And the other thing, and this is a kicker from my perspective, damaging abilities will also damage non-damaging abilities like weaken and things like that will still cause issue. So will cause issue and reset the modifier. So it's very, very hard to keep it going. I'm going to put it in the solid category. Next up, we have Sadist. Whenever a negative alteration is applied by the hero gains 1% opportunism buff for 2 turns. So, you could do this with like a bee's staff, hit a whole bunch of things, gain a bunch of opportunism, hit some things relatively hard. But maybe, let's say with some propagation increase, you're hitting 10 things. So maybe total you're rolling 20% opportunism, which is strong, but it's not it's not knocking my socks off. It would be pretty rare that I take Sadist, and when I do, I'm not blown away by the results. So I'm going to put it in that fine category. Like, I think it's good, but I often pick it because there's nothing else available. Resupply. You can no longer see my face because this perk is a tome to read. So basically, you get the Resupply Trap Skill, allows you to restore 1 charge to nearby traps. Resupply Trap Skill, 1 to 6 range, 9 targets. You get a 3x3 square. You get 3 uses per night and 1 charge per turn. Also unlocks Resupply Catapult skill, which restores 1 use per night to nearby catapults, and is also 1 to 6, only targets 1. So this is very situational. I have not taken this ever. I think traps are still underwhelming and you can't afford to invest in them. I am going to be kind to it and put it in specific builds because I do think that catapult resupply in particular, basically you're gaining 1.5 more catapults, is nothing to sneeze at. Then we have Energized. Every 7 mana spent, restore 1 action point. I like Energized. I think Energized is a good skill, but not exceptional. I think it's in the solid camp because things that restore action points are good and spending mana is good, especially if you have the sustain to be able to use up most of your mana pool every night. This is yielding you a fairly large number of action points. So I think overall Energized is good for almost any character. And that's one of the things that I think is really tricky about the way that they've designed the magic perk list, is that most of them apply to everyone because everyone is using mana. So the magic set of perks almost feels more like a mana set of perks. It's very mana focused, and we'll see that with Thrifty right here. And I think Thrifty is exceptional, right? Being able to cast things for a discount is really, really nice. And I think Thrifty is slightly better than Energized. No, actually, I think they're on the same tier. Do I think both of them are excellent? I take Thrifty all the time. So if I was looking at this, would I take Third Eye over Thrifty? It's closer than you might think. It's going to depend on how much sustain the character already has. Third Eye, though, I almost always like to take. So I'm going to leave these both down here. I think that might be a little controversial, but I do think that it is a very solid perk. The one thing that it suffers from that I think they could change with Thrifty is when you spend less mana with it, I think it should count the full amount of mana for things that cost mana. So like when we get down to Mana Shield, for instance, right? Every time you spend mana, you're gaining some block, and Thrifty kind of nerfs that, and that's a bit of an anti-synergy. I don't think it's a huge deal, but I don't think you should be penalized in that way for using it. So, Relentless. Whenever a hero has 3 or less move points and attacks in melee range, restore 2 move points. I really like Relentless. So I'm going to put that up here in the excellent tier. I think for melee characters, having the ability to go ham, go full bore into the fray, and then bounce from target to target and kind of chain your way off to the side is hugely beneficial. Vampire. Whenever an enemy is killed using physical damage or execute, restore 4 health. So this is the other half of sustain. This is health sustain. And I think that this is a solid perk. I don't think it's great. I think that with the changes to blood magic, it is no longer sufficient to keep you topped up. We'll talk about blood magic later. Apparently we'll talk about blood magic next. But I think the short version is that the level of vampirism is great for keeping you topped up unless you're spending your health pool on things or taking a ton of damage, in which case it's not quite able to catch up. So it's a nice passive heal, adds a bit of sustain, bolsters your daily health regen, but that's about it. Blood magic. Skills now cost health instead of, hold on, I just had a thought here. Okay, so for those who noticed that brief cut there, apologies. What happened is I realized that at the tier 2, I forgot to take a quick screenshot for upload later. So I went and grabbed one really quickly. Not a big deal. Back to blood magic. So skills now cost health instead of mana, 4 times the mana cost. All of a hero's mana is converted into daily health regen at a 50% conversion rate. Blood magic used to be exceptionally strong. I still think that it has a lot of potential with certain builds, but the cost now makes it more difficult to utilize effectively. It definitely eats into your health, and you need a lot more sustain, and you're going to need to be healing at the end of day with your daily health regen. So I'm going to put it here because I think that more often than not, I can still get something like Harvester and have the sustain that I need on my melees, and I don't need to swap this in because I'm not gaining a lot of health from it. Initiator. Situationally and generally, if you are building a multi-hit build, I think Initiator is excellent. If you're doing hand crossbow shenanigans, it is S tier. I'm going to knock it down to excellent because the minus 10% damage can ruin your first hit if you're not taking it. Like, it has a downside, but it is very good, very powerful. Next up, we have Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf is one of those ones where if it's procced, it's great, right? Because if there's no hero within 5 tiles, you're getting 8% damage, which is a nice generic boost, and 10 tiles, you're getting 12% damage. And you know that you're going to have 2 people that are basically soloing on a side. So I put this on the excellent tier. It's giving you a nice oomph in terms of damage, and for at least 2 out of your 6 heroes, you're going to be able to take advantage of Lone Wolf, so it has some value. Quantity versus quality. +3 propagation bounces, -6% propagation damage. So that doesn't affect Bee's poison, I don't believe, but citation needed on that one. Every 8 enemies killed by propagation, it bounces 1 less and you gain 3% more damage, which means that when you hit the number of propagation bounces you previously had, you're actually up 3% damage on your propagation, which is quite nice. So I put quantity versus quality firmly in the excellent tier if you are playing with propagation. You almost always want to hit more things with what you're doing if you're doing a propagation build. And propagation is common enough, like multi-hit, that I'm not putting it in the specific builds category. Runic Gift. +1 trinket equipment, 2 max. For every trinket equipped, +2 mana per item level. It's just bad. Like, it needs something more. You know, the extra trinket is great, but I so rarely find myself like hitting my characters out to the 9s, right? I'm not, a lot of times I finish games on Apocalypse 5 and people are still wearing the Fey amulet that they came in with at the beginning. So I just don't see it. Toxic Leech. Whenever a unit takes damage from poison in a range of 5, restore 2 health. This is another sustain one. The people that are poisoning, I think, are staying out of the fray. So I'm going to put this in specific builds because I think that maybe there's a world in which Poisonous and Poison Leech make a melee invincible or something like that. I don't see it. It hasn't happened to me yet, and the build eludes me. Longer weapons. This got a buff to my surprise. The reliability got improved on it. The reason that I say to my surprise is because longer weapons, I think, is way, way, way up there. I think +2 skill range is exceptional at tier 3, and I think that this is a very, very strong one to pick. Now, shorter weapons, on the other hand, you lose a skill range, you gain accuracy and dodge. Basically never taking that. I don't see a world in which that is something that I am looking for in my life, and I will not apologize for that. It's not one that I'm at all interested in. And I think that it doesn't do any of the things that I would need it to do. Like if it increased damage, so it was like, you know, sawed-off shotgun doing a bunch more damage or something like that, that's great. But 10% dodge and 15 accuracy, I don't think it's doing anything. All right, so I've taken the screenshot like I was supposed to. So tier 4, we have Critical Master. So you get 20% crit power right off the bat. And then every 12 units killed, I don't think this is the updated version of this one, because I think now it is every 5 units you crit, you gain the crit power. So there's a correction here. The wiki is slightly outdated. This one is really good, and it's better in its new form. So I think this goes up here in S tier. Almost anyone is going to be critting a lot at the end of the game, and gaining crit power just makes those crits hit harder, which gives you a lot more damage output. So I think Crit Master lives up there in the S tier. Bully. When attacking a unit affected by at least 2 different types of negative alteration, the attack gets guaranteed critical hit minus 20% damage. The minus 20% damage on this one bothers me so much. Now, granted, with Contamination, which we saw previously, you can almost guarantee that anything you're hitting has 2 debuffs on it. And if you have high crit power, you can guarantee that those crits are hitting pretty hard and pretty quickly offset 20% damage, because crit power comes pretty easily and effectively. So I think it is solid. I think I should try using it with someone who's using a druid staff, maybe even with weapon specialization, and there might be a world in which that's very powerful. Human Ballista. At the end of the enemy movement phase, the hero automatically attacks the 2 nearest enemies with Human Ballista Bolt skill. The skill is 110 to 140 base damage. Adaptive damage will be the same type of damage as the hero's best attribute, physical, magic, or ranged. Also, the special properties of the chosen damage. So for instance, if you are a magic caster, it's going to pierce because magic has its natural piercing. Long story short, Human Ballista, easiest S tier I've given out all day. The reason is it scales off of your damage. I cannot express enough how powerful that in and of itself is. I think it also scales off of your crit too, but citation needed on that one. But either way, your end game, you're rolling a hero that has maybe like 50 to 60% damage, and after the movement phase, you're essentially deleting the 2 things that are nearest to you, which means that if you're a melee, maybe half of the things that are surrounding you just instantly die. It is an exceptional skill. I cannot sing its praises highly enough. Siren. So then we have Blink. Unlock the Blink skill, allowing the hero to teleport to another tile. Costs 3 mana, range 1 to 6, target an empty tile, limited 2 uses per turn, vision and maneuver. Blink is good. I like mobility a lot. And I think Blink does an exceptional job of enabling you to get around. Vision on it is really nice, so you have no problem crossing to difficult places. You can get yourself out of trouble. It is an excellent, it's almost verging on S tier. I just have a hard time giving it S tier because of the mana cost. It's expensive. Explosive Essence. When attacking with a mana-consuming skill, the attack gets 50% critical power. Okay, this is another case where the magic tree just feels like the mana tree. And boy, this is a good skill, because almost everyone is going to be casting mana skills. And those mana skills, getting 50% critical power, is just doing a ton of additional damage. So this is a really good one. I'm gonna take it down from S tier though. I think it's an excellent skill. It's like 50% crit power is not game changing, and mana skills are not the only ones that you're using. So it is still exceptionally good though. Head On. Every 4 tiles traveled, the next attack gains plus 15% physical damage, no block. This modifier cannot be stacked. So the no block is much more interesting than the 15% physical damage, but for momentum builds in particular, this is a pretty money perk. This is quite strong. I'm going to put it in the solid... no, maybe I'm going to put it in the excellent category. It's very, very strong. Getting a little overpopulated up here, but if you have 12 movement, no, I'm going to move it down because it's only on 1 attack, right? It's not stacking for the remainder of the turn. It's a lot like a adder to momentum, and that's why I put it in solid, because if you're doing a momentum build, this is kind of like a must-have, or at least a melee momentum build. This is a must-have, but that's about the extent of it. Organic armor. Plus 50% healing received. All of the hero's armor is transformed into health at a conversion rate of 125%. I haven't built the organic tank of my dreams. I've tried so many times, and this one just ends up in the fine category, but like armor is better, so I think it actually goes to like the meh category because you're never stacking that much armor that, you know, like it's that crazy. I think if this was more like 200% and 100% healing, maybe it would start to crack the upper ranks, but it's not blowing my socks off. Inertia. Whenever a skill with momentum effect is cast, restore 2 movement points. I like it. It's, you know, it's fine. It's not incredible. I'm not like mind blown by it, but if you're running like a sword build, you're getting a lot of free movement. I think this stacks with Relentless in the sense that you can potentially get back 4 movement points, but it depends on the order in which those 2 operations operate. If they both proc, which I think they will, you can get back 4 movement, which is a lot of movement for sure with the sword build or some of the other momentum-based builds. Also very nice because it plays well. If we go back for 1 second, sorry. It plays well with the Scepter, which I still think is the kind of king of momentum. Mana Shield. Whenever a hero casts a skill, the hero gains X block buff for 3 turns, where X is the skill's mana cost. So I think it has potential, but it is so rare. Well, yeah, no, actually, I'm going to take this back. I'm going to put this in the solid camp. You're definitely spending mana on your melees. It is a shame it does not play well with blood magic. I have tested that out, so unless they changed it, that's, you know, that's just kind of the way it goes. But yeah, I think it's good. Having the extra block on your melees is excellent. 3 turns is pretty generous for how long it lasts, so you can stack up a decent amount of... If you have good sustain, you can stack up a decent amount of block. But I so rarely have amazing sustain on my melees, so I'm going to move it down to fine, I think. Because it really is only useful on melees. And I've never really done the melee caster thing. They just don't seem effective. Good old Specialist. Disables the second weapon set in exchange for plus 30% damage and plus 1 use per turn on every skill. This one is just, it's so situational. Like 30% damage is a lot. It's so hard. Because I think I could also, like, the problem is, okay, so the problem with Specialist, because I've had runs where I've used Specialist very effectively. Specifically, my Scepter Specialist run was probably my favorite. The issue with Specialist is plus 1 per use on every skill is not enough. It is very hard with almost any weapon to fully utilize the action points you have at your disposal in a given turn with only plus 1 use per turn. Now, adding quick reload to it maybe helps a little, but that's kind of its fundamental flaw. So if you're building a Scepter person to just blow up the druids on Lakeburg, cool. They run over, they hit for like 10k, and they run to the next one, hit for another 10k, and 30% is way, way overkill anyways. But I think it needs to be +2 uses per turn on every skill, and then maybe. And you could even, one thing they could think about doing here, and I know this is not like a what should they do, but if they made it +2 uses per turn on every skill that doesn't cost mana, and +1 use per turn on every skill that costs mana, I think that would work. Because I think what they're worried about is you getting too many blazes or something like that. That's my thought on the matter. As it is right now, only incredibly situationally would I ever consider Specialist. But I don't think it's bad when I do pick it. Versatility. Straight to the specific builds you go. The hero's 2 lowest damage type attributes are increased by 55% of the highest one. So if you're sitting at 60% magic damage, you're gaining like 30-something% damage from Versatility. Maybe there is a world in which I will someday use it, but all of these are bad outside of that specific world. As a reminder, these bottom 2, they're bad, but maybe there's a way to use these ones. These ones I have not figured out a way. Volatile Reaction. Oh boy, good old Volatile Reaction. This one right here is the best way to get your party members killed. When the patches first came live, Volatile Reaction was just brutal. I was not paying attention to diagonals. I was one-shotting people, my own people with Blaze. It's really, really good, but only on propagation builds, but it is exceptionally good on propagation builds. Epidemic. When applying poison to a unit, also apply contagion alteration for 2 turns. Here's the problem. It is hard to get a lot of poison on a particular unit, like a bulky. Let's take them as an example, right? So you have a bulky, and maybe you get lucky, and the bulky is standing next to a splitter, and it's just the 2 of them as an island. So and let's say you have 10 propagation bounces, so it propagates back and forth between the 2 of them, and maybe you get 8 stacks of, I don't know, like maybe like 60 or 70 poison. I can't do the math, so we'll call it 100 poison. So you land 800 poison on the bulky. Now, the problem is, that's amazing, and the first thing you want to do is you want to use Contagion to spread that around. And you can't, right? Everything else around it is dead. It's on an island by itself. That was the only way you were able to stack up the poison. My issue with Epidemic, and generally with Contagion, is it is so hard to stack a ton of damage, or a ton of poison, or a ton of, or stun, or whatever it happens to be, on a unit, while also giving yourself a lot of opportunity. Because the other thing is, don't forget, Contagion only propagates north, south, east, west. It should totally propagate in a circle range 1. But anyways, all that is to say, I think Epidemic is super meh, and maybe there's like some situational value. Field Study. I want to like it. I like skill range. We've already established that. But basically, for every 12 units killed at a distance of 4 or more tiles, +1 skill range, this modifier is reset every morning. So there is a world where using Field Study, you could stack up a ton of skill range, which is cool, but it just costs a lot and takes a long time to do that. And I think at some point you do reach diminishing returns. And I also think that skill range is limited by the upper bound. I don't remember what it is, but I'm going to put it in the fine category. I probably wouldn't take it most of the time. There's lots of better things to take from my perspective. Proximity Shot. So this is the sawed-off shotgun ability that the short range ability is not. So when attacking with a skill dealing range damage, the skill gets +24% damage reduced by 4 for every tile of distance from the hero after the first one. So I think that Proximity Shot has some potential to work well with versatility and flexibility to create some type of like short range damage dealery type of thing. But I'm going to put it in the fine category because I also think it holds a little bit of utility. I think there is a world in which this could be elevated really high with like a pistol build, a pistol sword build, where you're doing a ton of momentum stuff. You get the 24% damage a lot of the time. I think it could really sing, but it's very specific build focused, and I think it's just fine. Like 24% damage is a lot, but it's only on range skills. And when are your people doing ranged attacks from that short? So that is tier 4. I'm sorry I didn't call out when tier 2 ended, but like I said, in the description down below, you can find all of my tier lists so that you can look at them and you can compare where things ended up. And you can think of that as like, okay, I'm at tier 2. These are the things that I'm looking at. These are the things that are best. Now on to tier 5. There's some very obviously juicy stuff. I think a lot of these are going to be going in the top tier. But first and foremost, we have Legendary Assassin. Every 3 isolated units killed, restore 1 action point. It's too good. I love Legendary Assassin. I really like dagger builds. I really like isolated builds. I think just generally speaking, this is, if you play well around Legendary Assassin, you're getting insane action economy out of it. You're getting tons of additional actions. Hex, negative alterations applied by the hero has its duration increased by 1. Again, really strong. I put it in the excellent tier because it does extend things like stun, contagion, etc. But it's not quite, like, I don't take Hex that frequently, and I think for good reason. Next up, Fortress Master. Oh, Fortress Master, my Fortress Master. Increases the damage of all defenses, catapults, ballistas, and traps within range of 10 by 50%. I think they could make the range on this unlimited just because it's a pain in the butt to enable, and it would be significantly better. As it is, like, I can't pick this with good conscience over something that's going to increase my character's actual damage. Mana Collector. Whenever a critical hit is landed, restore 2 mana at the end of the hero's turn, up to 20 per turn. Love Mana Collector. Have always loved it. It is very strong. It does an insane job of sustain, and it is like Harvester, except it actually restores within the night, so you get even more sustain, which means you can just be casting. Again, here's the problem with the magic perk list, and I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but it's more about mana, and everybody is using mana. I wish that the magic perk list was just about magic skills, and they had a separate one that was like the mana engine perk list. Like, it could be a one like defense, assassin, poison. They could have one that is like mana engine, and it could be about sustain, and you could be like, okay, if I pick this tier list, I get Harvester, I get Mana Collector, and my character can just free cast. Sheer Power. Attacks now ignore 50% of the target's resistance. This effect can be cumulative with the magic's damage's natural property, additively for a total of 100. So it's basically 100% piercing. I think it's good for blowing up targets of opportunity. I think it's slightly better than Hex, which makes me want to put Hex down in the solid camp, because I would rather have Sheer Power. And it's nice because it is a magic damage specific thing. Although it says attacks, now that I look at it, I've always thought of it as being magic specific, but a lot of people could benefit from Sheer Power. So that's why I'm putting it in the excellent tier. And I might even take it with a lot of folks. Berserk. Whenever the hero is attacked, 3%, they gain plus 3% damage. This modifier is reset every morning. So there is a world in which Berserk is just, you know, next level insano, huge damage bonuses by the end. I just haven't gotten there because I don't like taking hits. This may be a common part of, like, a common thread in the way that this tier list is composing for me, but taking hits is risky, and more often killing things is better than letting them hit you. And so if you're doing a really good job killing things, nothing is hitting you. So Berserk is great, and I like the damage bonus that comes with it, and I can see a world in which it could be very powerful, and the fact that it resets every morning is very strong, but it's not for me necessarily. Now, Boom, whenever an enemy is killed within a range of 3, the overkill damage is transferred to all adjacent units. I like Boom. I think Boom is fun, but I don't think it's S tier. And the reason that I say that is that the range of 3 is a little tough, and I think that it does work on all tiers. So there's a lot of advantage to it, but you have to be relatively close, and doing a ton of overkill damage is hard. The time when I used Boom most effectively was with that Scepter build where I was rocking Specialist, and I would just run over to something, blow it up specifically, and everything next to it would also die because I was hitting for like 2,000 every time. It's a fun skill. I think it is very good, but it's somewhat situational because of the range limit. Adrenaline Rush. Whenever the hero dodges, gain a action point buff for 1 turn. Adrenaline Rush. I don't do a lot of dodge builds, but I think it's solid. I think if you're relying on things dodging, it means that you didn't take Human Ballista because you may get less turns that way. And also action points at some point hit diminishing returns, right? You know, let's say you gain 5 action points because 5 archers hit your character. You're not even going to be able to spend all 5 of those action points. So it's really, you know, it's good, but generally speaking, if you're dodging a bunch of attacks, it means you put yourself in a dangerous place. Big Game Hunter. When attacking an enemy with 300 or more health, the attack gets 15% of the target's health as additional damage applied after damage, but before resistance block and critical. So, Big Game Hunter, I like it. I'm probably just going to put it in the solid category. I think that it gets elevated above solid if you're, say, running a hand crossbow, just because then if you're hitting a bulky, you're gaining 15% of the target's hit points as additional damage, which means you're just hitting really hard with those hand crossbow shots. I've had that happen before. I think it's very good for situations like that, and otherwise maybe good for taking out druids on Lakeburg and a few other things. Blessing. Any buff applied by this hero has its duration increased by 1 turn. Now, I think that this affects potions that create buffs. It affects cheer and a few other things, but it's weirdly situational. I'm going to put it down here, which may be surprising because it's probably like in the solid fine category, but like I have not found the build that makes Blessing insane, and I just need to play with it more. If Blessing worked with Transfer, that could be interesting, but I don't think it does, because I think Transfer grants the points, not plus for the next turn point. So this is only buffs that increase by 1 turn. So I don't know. I don't think Blessing knocks my socks off. Please, if you've made it this far in the video, you're like an hour into the video. If you've done incredible things with Blessing, please tell me what is the linchpin of making Blessing incredible. Don't panic. When attacking a tile within the Haven, the attack gains plus 10% accuracy and 30% damage. This is a very strong skill. Not quite S tier, but especially on runs where you're seeing the, you know, you're on the final night, you're just trying to hang in there. Don't Panic is a great pickup. The plus 30% damage is exceptional if you know your walls have already fallen and you're just going to be picking off panic-inducing enemies. Very good. The only thing that keeps it from being an S tier is they have to be in your base for it to work, which is not great. Night Owl. On the 5th turn of the night, grants 2 action points and 3 movement points. Modifier resets every morning. I used to like Night Owl a lot more. The problem is, by turn 5, a lot can already have gone very wrong. That's the trouble. So, you know, I think that it lives very happily in solid, but you often want to start strong. You know, night 3 is usually the biggest wave of enemies, and by night 5, you're often really behind. Potent Toxins. Plus 75% poison damage. Any poison applied by the hero has its duration decreased by 1. So it's like fast burn, basically. So it hits harder, and, you know, if you're doing 3 turns, you're basically losing 33% of the duration, but gaining 75% of the damage. So it's good, but it's really not great. I want poison builds to work. You know, I want Epidemic and Potent Toxins to just create this thing where I can have a poison dealer just spreading poison across the countryside and wrecking everyone. Just doesn't happen, unfortunately, in my experience. Exploit weakness. Isolation is increased by 75% of the hero's reliability. Opportunism is increased by 75% of the hero's accuracy. Here's the problem. I like isolation. I don't like isolation being coupled with reliability because I generally don't pick up reliability on level ups. I do pick up accuracy, but only until I get into like the mid 20s, like 23 to 26 is like my comfort zone for accuracy. So I'm gaining like 19 or 20 opportunism, and I'm rarely gaining a lot of reliability unless I took cherry picking, in which case I'm gaining some. But if I'm going for an isolation build, I will usually pick up exploit weakness just because I have picked up other things and the reliability is usually there. And then surgical strike, last but not least. When attacking a unit with full health, the attack gets 50% reliability and 20% accuracy. It's also good. I think it falls almost in exactly the same category. I think these two are almost exactly the same in the sense that it's like good, but not mind-blowing. And that right there, believe it or not, is the tier list. So that was a fun exercise for me. I think it was really useful for me to figure out what my thinking is on a lot of these different perks. The surprises were, for me, how high Quick Reload ended up on the list. The parity between Coagulation and Back Protection, how close they are. I always thought Coagulation was like great later on if you're building towards it versus Back Protection. And I don't know if I totally agree with this, but there's certainly some worlds in which you can get a lot of it, a lot of daily health regen. But I might switch those in hindsight. And, you know, none of these down here were a surprise. Those are the ones, these are the perks that I look at and I go, I wish I could use you. But at an hour and 7 minutes, I'm going to call it here. So thank you if you made it to the end. That's incredible. I would love for you to leave me a comment letting me know what you think, what you liked about what I did here, what you didn't like, what I did right and wrong. I'm not an expert on the last spell. I play it, and like any roguelike game, I play it and I learn through playing. And I have tried to take this opportunity to think critically about the way that I'm thinking about these skills in my own playstyle and the way that I generally rank them to get to where that I have gotten, which is almost to the maximum difficulty and with some reliability to getting there. So for now, thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for Last Spell content, I have videos that go live daily. I also just yesterday posted a update video with the patch notes, current state of the game, that kind of stuff. And I'll keep creating videos like this as they're useful. If this video is particularly popular, I will likely do one for the weapons, do a weapons tier list, and potentially also do a level ups tier list, although I think that one's going to be pretty boring because I almost always prioritize raw damage and crit, and I have a minimum accuracy that I like to get to, and then I like picking up isolation, poison, opportunism, depending on what I'm doing. But anyways, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.